Hey, Bill. Hi, everybody. Good evening. There's no mic here, but I'm a mic, but I don't need a microphone. Welcome to the winter 2024, or 2023 if you're one of those people, but it's really 2024, presentation of the CPC, Central Penn College, for those of you who don't know, film series. Tonight, and it's Groundhog Day. So tonight we're watching the Harry Ramis production of Groundhog Day. Well, he directed it. I believe he co-wrote this too. He was also a co-author of Animal House, Sailing Because We're a College, although let's not get out of hand. So I'm just up here to say that we're happy to have you here. Our presenter will be our assistant professor of media studies, Paul Miller. He's the co-advisor with me of the Nightly News Media Club at Central Penn College, which doesn't mean too much. It means we get the donations for the concession stand, but we're behind it. So Professor Miller is a film aficionado, and he's going to give us an introduction, tell us a little bit about the movie, and then we will be watching it. And because our club is the sponsor, please get some items from the concession tables. They are by donation. We will appreciate it. So now, I give you Paul Miller. Wait a second.
So now, I give you Professor Miller.
Thank you, Robbie.
And now I give you Professor Miller.
So now, I give you Professor Miller.
So now, I give you Professor Miller. And happy birthday.
You are all so sweet. Thank you so much.
What our club president, Abby Bresky, and our other members didn't mention, and I didn't either because I thought one of them would say it, is today's Paul's birthday. Shouldn't you be up in Clinton County somewhere? Yeah. Jefferson County, sorry.
I think they hit the nail right on the head there with the background, getting us started. Fortunately, hopefully many of you have already seen this movie, so hopefully I'm not about to spoil anything for you, but if you have not seen this movie, well, it just celebrated its, 30th anniversary last year, so what are you waiting for? That being said, if you haven't seen it before, you're in for a treat for sure. So this is always one of my favorite movies because obviously, born on Groundhog Day, I've always had a connection to it. I remember when I was 12 years old, going to see it at the theater with my mom. I'm pretty sure I still have my ticket stubs somewhere from all that time ago. But this has always been one of my favorite movies for a variety of reasons. Number one, I love Bill Murray. I mean, I grew up on Ghostbusters. He's had so many iconic roles over the year. Caddyshack. I mean, come on, we could keep going on and on about Bill. But this movie was just, it hit me in so many different ways. And of course, when I was 12, it was funny. You know, I thought it was funny when he punches Ned Ryerson right in the face. But as I grew older, it impacted me in a lot of different ways. And so I want to share with you not only my own personal connection to this, other than, of course, it being on my birthday, but I also want to give you a few things you want to look out for as you watch the movie, hopefully for multiple times, like maybe this is your 5th or 6th time. Maybe you watch it a little bit differently this time. So just a couple things I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of background information. We're going to talk about the box office and how successful it was initially. And we're also going to talk about some of the thematic aspects that we want to see as we watch. And we're also going to talk about some of the different stages that the Phil Connors character goes through in the movie. So any film that you see has a log line. It's essentially a 1 to 2 sentence, about less than 30 words, quick description of what the movie is. Anytime you go to IMDb, you see the little description about the film. Ultimately, what that is the log line. And here's the log line for this film. A self-centered Pittsburgh weatherman finds himself inexplicably trapped in a small town as he lives the same day over and over again. But to simply frame this movie that way is an injustice, because I think what people think of when they think of Groundhog Day is the repetition. And I think in a way we can all appreciate that repetition. Every day we get up, every day we eat breakfast, we put our clothes on, we get in the car, we go to work, we work our day, we come home, we cook dinner, we hang out with our family, we watch TV. Sometimes you think it's Groundhog Day because all you're doing is just the same things over and over. And maybe, if you're lucky, on Saturday and Sunday you can mix that up a little bit. But then Monday, what happens? It's just like it all starts back over again. Now, of course, this movie was very, very well received when it came out. A $14 million budget, which is today like one episode of The Mandalorian created for Disney Plus. And it was able to make more than 5 times its money. And it actually did receive some accolades. One interesting thing, as you may know, is often comedies don't do well at Oscar season. And one of the things that I talked about when I taught this movie in one of my classes was why that was. Now, I don't have a chance to talk with you about that tonight. But the long story is, it wasn't even nominated for an Oscar. And here it is over 30 years later, we're still talking about this film. But it was nominated for Best Original Screenplay by the British Academy Film Awards and nominated for 17 other awards. I don't want to downplay that, but 0 Oscar nominations. As my esteemed colleague, Professor Olympi, mentioned, Harold Ramis is the director. You may know him as Egon, of course, from Ghostbusters, but he's actually a very proficient filmmaker, known for directing Caddyshack, National Lampoon's Vacation, and even more modern films like Analyze This. Unfortunately, recently, Harold passed away, and they paid homage to him in the most recent Ghostbusters, and they brought him back, and I don't want to give away any spoilers because it's a very crucial part of the movie, but he is in it. I will point out, one of the sort of I Spy things that I want you to look at is he does make a cameo in this movie. If you've seen it before, I'm sure you've seen him, but if not, keep an eye out for him. And of course, Egon as Ghostbusters. He was also in some more recent films. Again, if you've never seen this film, or even if you have, really interesting cast, very small cast of 4 main people, and that would be Bill, of course, his love interest, Andie MacDowell, Chris Elliott, and of course, Brian Doyle Murray, who is also known as Bill's older brother. If you've ever seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, you will know Brian Doyle Murray, and of course, he has a list a mile long of things he's been involved with. Now, just in case you were wondering about what this whole Groundhog Day celebration is, I thought I'd fill you in on a couple of pieces of trivia that I found today that was interesting. The number one thing is, Punxsutawney Phil, according to this legend that these folks have, the groundhog, the keepers and purveyors of the Groundhog Day folklore, say that Punxsutawney Phil is immortal in his story, and that he never dies. Unfortunately, a groundhog's average lifespan is 6 to 8 years, so that story is not true, but it's all part of the allure and the legend that comes along with Groundhog Day. One thing I actually learned today was that the reason for this holiday is, there was a reason. It wasn't just arbitrarily picked as February 2nd. It was known as the Cross Quarter Day, which is the halfway point between the 2 solstices. So halfway point between the winter and the summer solstice, which is very interesting. And the last thing that I thought was really interesting was apparently all over the world, there are multiple celebrations much like this in other countries, European countries, and they use different types of animals, which I found very interesting. What's even crazier was Germans, of which I'm German descent, when they settled in this area, the Pennsylvania Dutch, of which much of my family comes from, couldn't find badgers because in Germany, badger was the animal that they used. But there weren't a lot of badgers in Pennsylvania. So, you know what Pennsylvania has a lot of? Groundhogs. So groundhogs were much easier to find, so over the years it morphed from Badger Day to Groundhog Day. So I thought that was some interesting pieces of trivia here for you. But here's the thing, and I've made sure anybody who talked to me today about Phil's prognostication that I educated this very simple fact, and it's that good old Punxsutawney Phil has got about a 40% accuracy rate. So even the worst weathercaster isn't as bad as Phil. Of course, it's more about the fun of it. They even talk about it in the movie. There's a scene with Andy McDowell's character when they talk about the lore of Groundhog Day that sort of kind of explains it. Yes, I think everyone pretty much knows the story is nothing but a lie, or if nothing else, just a fun play. But I think everybody knows that it's all just sort of an act and part of tradition, though, in our local culture, and it's now morphed into more nationwide culture. Something, again, I don't know how many people know who have seen this movie, but this movie was not filmed in Pennsylvania. It was actually filmed in Woodstock, Illinois. Gobbler's Knob, a beautiful place. I've been there many times, never on Groundhog Day, unfortunately, but I've been there multiple times, and it's gorgeous. Love it. One of the things I thought interesting was, well, why didn't they shoot it at Gobbler's Knob? I mean, it's really, really fantastic if you ever get there. And Ramis noted, quote, "We actually had location scouting tapes of Punxsutawney from the Pennsylvania Film Commission. We got the flavor of the town from the tape, but the production possibilities were not good, both in accommodations for cast and crew and in shooting possibilities." The bottom line is, when you go to Gobbler's Knob, it is in literally the middle of nowhere. I mean, it is not even, it's literally on a backcountry road that you just stumble upon. So I think that's what the issue was. And even if I recall correctly, there's one hotel in the town. And so basically what he was saying is, we don't have the accommodations to shoot here. Whereas in Woodstock, Illinois, picturesque town, bed and breakfast, hotels, that type of thing, restaurants. They basically had the infrastructure to do that. Well, here's just a couple of pictures of me at Gobbler's Knob. You'll see right here is myself at the entrance. They have like a big door that opens up. It's a really excellent scene. You can kind of see that. Bottom left is good old Professor Miller standing in front of the iconic sign. And then in the top left, that would be me with Punxsutawney Phil. He did not bite me. I was not allowed to hold him, which is okay. One really good piece of trivia from this movie is the scene where Bill Murray is driving with the groundhog. The groundhog bit Bill Murray. And Bill finished the scene like the consummate professional that he was. But the groundhogs are nasty. They are not lovable creatures. So, but yeah, I've spent a couple different times at Gobbler's Knob. One of the companies I used to work for had a couple of events that we did there. And we traveled up there, I think, on 3 different occasions. And we got to know the people called the Inner Circle. It's basically a nonprofit organization that operates to continue this legend and put on the Groundhog Day celebration. So we got to know them and still stay in contact with them every once in a while. But it is a good 4-hour drive, 3.5, depending on how lead-foot you are. But I really have enjoyed my time there. Well, let's talk about the movie. Obviously, that's why we're here. One of the things that just off the top, maybe a little bit of superficial thing, that I find really interesting is, of course we know Phil Connors and Punxsutawney Phil share the same name. But we also can sort of put together and piece together that they're both weather forecasters. I mean, Phil is a television weather forecaster, and Punxsutawney Phil is essentially a weather forecaster. So one of the sort of parallels there that I wanted to look into is, what's the play on that? I mean, they literally could have named Bill Murray's character anything, but why Phil? And essentially, it's this idea that plays to the theme of repetition and living the same day over and over, that Phil, in the scene on the left here, when he's getting out of his car and they are on the highway and the highway is closed, he is now giving up his ability to predict the future and know what the future brings. And that is a sort of a sign in the movie when the movie sort of goes south for Phil. So it's this idea of the limits of prediction and control of our own lives. At this point, his predictions have proved false because in the beginning he says, oh, it's going to push through to Altoona. Anybody who's ever driven the stretch of road between Altoona and Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I currently go, and Punxsutawney knows, once you get over that mountain, it snows all the time. So just that weather forecast alone is kind of BS, if you ask me. What's really interesting is this idea of symbolism, and that's what we're going to see sort of throughout this film. One of the big things that I really want you guys to look for throughout the film is the different stages that Phil Connors goes through. What's very interesting, and I have just a couple of examples here along the bottom of the screen of different points where you can start seeing some of these shifts in his attitude and the way that he operates. And one thing I want to go to is something that, as I was researching this, I'd never read before. And it's that what happens in this film really goes along with the stages of grief. And some you may be familiar with, the stages of grief. I know that the pictures at the bottom are a little tough to see, but essentially, on the far left, at the very beginning, once he wakes up that second day and realizes that something's wrong, he's in denial. The first maybe 10, 15 minutes is him thinking that he's dreaming or he's in some trance and not accepting it. He then goes to anger. And well, in the first one, I have where he says to the innkeeper, do you ever have deja vu? Because he's not accepting the fact that this is actually going on. Secondly is the idea of anger and how he gets very angry and he starts running around town frantically and he doesn't understand what's happening to him. At the bottom, I have a picture of when the guy that he sees as soon as he walks out the door every single day, when he grips him up and throws him up against the wall. That's the photo that I have there. He then gets to the point where he starts to employ bargaining, where he's sort of accepted it and he's trying to figure out what's going on, but he starts taking some steps for people other than himself. Of course, there's probably the darkest part of this film is when he falls into the stage of depression. He makes several comments, and they actually show him, not illicitly, but some of it's implied, of the suicides that he attempts. They show him throwing a toaster in the bathtub. They show him in one of the most obvious stunt double scenes you'll ever see, him jumping off the building. And then lastly, of course, really the part of the third act is his not only acceptance, but change and shift in what he is and how he operates his life. So I want you to kind of look for that as we go through today, is just try to sort of analyze these 5 stages that he goes throughout the film. You know, as I was putting this together, I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by a couple of students. One's our film series correspondent, and another was somebody who was doing a project for class. And you know, the number one question that people want to ask when it comes to this movie is, well, how many days was Phil in the loop? And I'll be honest, I wanted to show a video tonight, and but I didn't think that this was the time or place. You all have YouTube, and you most certainly can go check that out on your own. But I wanted to just pull 2 little pieces about this particular question. Now, the one video that I watched really broke this down, and it was called Groundhog Day Lasts How Long for Bill Murray? It's like a 5-minute video, definitely worth a good watch. But essentially, this is the conclusion that they come up with. The least number of days is 33. That's just them going through, trying to figure out where the cuts are, when night goes to day, etc. Came up with 33. The maximum number of days shown was 91. But then in the third one, they took some liberties and tried to put parts together. For instance, there are really 2 scenes that stick out to me here. For one, he learns to play the piano like a master pianist. I don't know if anyone's ever played the piano or frankly any instrument. It takes a very long time to become proficient at an instrument, even if you're practicing all day, every day. They also made some other inferences. For example, when he was doing the ice sculpting. Can you imagine how long it would take to get good at ice sculpting? And that's sort of what they were saying here is, you know, we're assuming a certain number of days to acquire these skills. That's not even taking into consideration him memorizing people's routines, names, backgrounds. There are so many little details that sort of play into this. So again, there is no answer. But the closest thing to an answer that we get might come from the person who co-wrote and directed this film. That would be Mr. Harold Ramis. Now, when he was asked in 2007 on the DVD commentary, which is on the DVD I actually have, he said that he thought it would be about 10 years that he was stuck in this time loop. However, not 2 years later, he said, I think the 10-year estimate is too short. It takes at least 10 years to get good at anything. And allowing for the downtime and misguided years he spent, it had to be more like 30 or 40 years. I also have a little note here at the bottom. Co-writer Danny Rubin, which Professor Olympi mentioned, came out and said that he believes it was a lifetime that he was stuck in this time loop. So you've got a wide variety of different interpretations. I personally would tend to agree with Ramos's 30 to 40 years, but I could certainly see it being much longer than that. So as we get ready to watch this film, which I'm super, super excited to do with all of you, there's a couple things that I do want you to keep in mind. Of course, we talked earlier about the different stages that Phil Connor's character goes through, but there's another couple that I really want you to think about. Really, the arc of this whole story has to do with redemption. Phil at the beginning is a detestable person, very egocentric, and trust me, even Andy McDowell's character calls him out many times for his huge ego. But through the film, he shows signs of redemption. He makes amends. He tries to save people's lives. And finally gets to the point where he understands that living is not just about yourself, it's about other people. Of course, probably one of the most analyzed parts of this movie over the years is the idea that basically Bill Murray is stuck in purgatory, that he is sort of in between, after death, in between heaven and hell, and has to make decisions based on, doing the right thing, the golden rule, in order to move to the next phase of his life. And of course, probably one of the most clear to me is what the purpose of life is. And I think, at least in my opinion, Phil Connors at the end of this manages to find that. So I do want to thank you. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. But I also want you to think of something when you watch this movie, when you leave this movie today, and when you think of this movie in the future on February 2nd from years to come. And hopefully maybe more often than just Groundhog Day we watch this, because the message here is really something special. I had a student who lived in Texas. They were really interested, they loved the movie, and they wanted to do something for the extra credit that I offered with this. And this guy wrote one of the most poignant comments on a film I have ever seen in the 11 years of me doing this. And he says, this movie does an amazing job at painting a picture that illustrates how living life is never about us. We exist to live for others. That's the message of this movie. And why this comes to what we're here today. Today's my birthday. And the fact that I get to spend it with so many important people in my life, it really means the world to me. Because one of the most wonderful quotes that I've ever heard, and one I try to live by every day of my life, is from Rick Warner, who wrote A Purpose-Driven Life. And he says, when you give someone your time, you are giving them a portion of your life that you will never get back. Your time is your life. That's why the greatest gift that you can give someone is your time. And all of you are giving me the greatest birthday gift that I could ever have, and that is that you are here with me right now, about to watch one of the greatest movies in the history of film. So for any one of you out there who's here in support of me and to be here because of my birthday, you have no idea how much it means to me. So I want to thank you again for being here.